Behind the lights, the fame, and the red carpets, Hollywood stardom wasn't just earned, it was manufactured. Studios rewrote birth certificates, erased entire family histories, and built flawless backstories to keep the illusion alive. These are the 20 most shocking family secrets hidden by Hollywood's greatest stars. Number 20. Merle Oberon. Merle Oberon spent her entire Hollywood career terrified that someone from Bombay might recognize little Estelle Thompson. Born in 1911 in Mumbai, her mother Constance was just 12 when she gave birth. The father was Constance's stepfather, Arthur Thompson. To hide this scandal, the family pretended grandmother Charlotte was Merle's mother, and Constance was her older sister. When Hollywood discovered Estelle Thompson, they renamed her Merle Oberon and amplified the deception. Her fabricated biography claimed she was born in Tasmania to a British Army officer who died hunting. They chose Tasmania because its registry office had burned recently. No records meant no questions. The truth was that Oberon was Anglo-Indian, born to a white father and Eurasian mother, with Ceylonese and Maori heritage. In the 1930s, the Motion Picture Production Code banned portrayals of interracial relationships. 30 states prohibited interracial marriage. For Oberon, discovery meant career death. Columbia Pictures spent thousands maintaining her white image. Special pink-tinted lights followed her to every set, washing out her natural complexion. Makeup artists supplied chemical lightening creams that burned her skin raw. She avoided daylight shooting and outdoor scenes whenever possible. Even her husband, director Alexander Korda, never knew the truth. She died in 1979, still maintaining the Tasmania fiction. Her Bombay birth certificate was discovered only after her death, revealing her real heritage and the exhausting deception she'd maintained for 50 years of stardom. Number 19. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth's father, Eduardo, saw dollar signs the moment his daughter could walk. Born Margarita Cancino to a Spanish dancer and his Irish-American wife, she was performing in Tijuana nightclubs by age 12, dressed to look older, while grown men watched. Eduardo made her pose as his wife during their dance routines in Nevada casinos and Mexican border towns. Audiences never knew they were watching a father force his child to play his lover. Behind closed doors, Eduardo abused his daughter throughout these tours. Years later, she told Orson Welles about the abuse. Friends said Welles never recovered from what she revealed. When Columbia Pictures discovered her, they saw a problem. She was too Latin for 1930s audiences. Studio head Harry Cohn ordered a transformation. They raised her hairline 2 inches through painful electrolysis, burning away hundreds of hair follicles to create an Anglo forehead. They dyed her black hair auburn and taught her to speak without her Spanish accent. Rita Hayworth was born, but Margarita Cancino had to die first. She married 5 times, searching for something she couldn't name. Her most famous quote revealed everything. "They go to bed with Gilda and wake up with me." The tragedy was that even Rita didn't know who me was anymore. The studio had erased Margarita so thoroughly that when Alzheimer's took her memories in her final years, she sometimes spoke Spanish as if her real self was finally breaking free. Number 18. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando's Mulholland Drive mansion witnessed a murder on May 16, 1990, that destroyed what was left of his family. His son Christian shot Dag Drawlett, the boyfriend of Brando's daughter Cheyenne, in what he claimed was an accident during a struggle. The bullet that killed Drolet also killed something in Brando. He aged 10 years overnight. Christian pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, serving 5 years of a 10-year sentence. But prison walls couldn't contain the real tragedy. Cheyenne, 8 months pregnant and unable to testify at the trial, spiraled into madness. She attempted suicide twice in Tahiti, while the trial played out in Los Angeles newspapers. Brando spent millions on lawyers and psychiatrists, but money couldn't buy his daughter's sanity back. On April 16, 1995, Cheyenne hanged herself in her mother's Tahitian home. She was 25 years old. Brando never acted again. The man who'd revolutionized cinema spent his last years as a recluse, weighing over 300 pounds, haunted by the ghosts of the 2 children he'd failed to save. Number 17. Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson was 37 years old, already famous, already nominated for an Oscar, when a Time magazine reporter called him with a question that shattered his world. "Did you know June was your mother?" For nearly 4 decades, the woman he'd called sister was actually the woman who'd given birth to him. The woman he'd called mother, Ethel May, was his grandmother. Both women were already dead. He would never get answers. June had been 17, unmarried, Catholic. In 1936 New Jersey, a pregnant teenager meant shame for the entire family. So Ethel May, June's mother, made a decision. She would raise baby Jack as her own. June would be the older sister who visited between dancing jobs in Atlantic City. The performance was flawless. Even close relatives maintained the lie. Nicholson took the news with what friends called eerie calm. But something changed. The controlled actor became Hollywood's wildest bachelor, as if making up for lost time, lost identity, lost chances to know who he really was. Every role afterward contained a hint of that betrayal, that sense that nothing was quite what it seemed. Number 16. Marilyn Monroe. The woman the world knew as Marilyn Monroe started life as Norma Jean Mortensen, a girl nobody wanted. Her mother, Gladys, cut film at RKO Studios until paranoid delusions convinced her that coworkers were poisoning her coffee and radio waves carried secret messages. The psychiatric hospital took Gladys when Norma Jean was 7. The little girl watched her mother vanish behind institutional walls, beginning her journey through 11 foster homes before age 16. The state paid families $20 monthly to keep her. Some provided basic care. Others spent the money on liquor while she slept in garages. In foster home number 9, she learned that being pretty attracted the wrong kind of attention from grown men. That's when the stutter began, her throat closing around words like no and please. She developed a breathy, childlike voice as protection, making herself seem too fragile to harm. By the time she transformed into Marilyn Monroe, that whisper had become her trademark. Directors called it a brilliant technique, method acting. She never explained that it was actually a survival mechanism from a childhood spent trying to disappear. The woman who made cameras fall in love with her had learned performance as self-defense. She married at 16 to avoid returning to the orphanage. 3 marriages later, she still called friends at 3 a.m., terrified of being alone. The sleeping pills helped until they didn't. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn took enough Nembutal to finally stop running from Norma Jean. She was 36, forever frozen as the world's most desired woman who never believed anyone truly wanted her. Number 15. Clara Bow. Clara Bow's 2 older sisters died in infancy, leaving her alone in a Brooklyn tenement with an alcoholic father and a mother who suffered from epileptic seizures and psychosis. One night in 1919, 14-year-old Clara woke to find her mother, Sarah, holding a butcher knife to her throat, convinced that killing her daughter would save her from suffering. Clara's screams brought neighbors running. Sarah was institutionalized and died 4 years later. School offered no relief. Classmates mocked her stutter daily. Her only friend was Johnny, a boy from her building. When Clara was 9, she heard him screaming and ran to find him on fire from an overturned kerosene heater. She threw a carpet over him, but Johnny died in her arms. Years later, Hollywood directors marveled at Clara's ability to cry on command. She simply thought about holding Johnny while he burned. Paramount discovered her through a magazine beauty contest in 1921 and invented a middle-class background, erasing the poverty, violence, and trauma. By 1927, she was the It Girl, Hollywood's biggest star, receiving 45,000 fan letters monthly. But fame couldn't fix what childhood had broken. Clara needed sedatives to sleep and shook between takes. At 28, she walked away from Hollywood at her peak, retiring to a Nevada ranch. She spent her remaining 37 years away from crowds and cameras, finally finding the safety that had eluded her entire childhood. Number 14. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was 35 years old when he cast 15-year-old Lolita McMurray in The Gold Rush, changing her name to Lita Gray for the screen. By the time filming started, she was 16 and pregnant with his child. California law in 1924 was clear. A relationship with a minor meant prison time, even for the world's most famous comedian. Chaplin's lawyers arranged a rushed wedding in Empalme, Mexico, where no one asked questions about the bride's age. Lita gave birth to Charles Jr. 6 months later. The marriage was a disaster from the start. Chaplin allegedly demanded she get an abortion when she first got pregnant. When she refused, he treated her like a prisoner, controlling her money, her movements, and even whom she could speak to. The 1927 divorce filing ran 50 pages of accusations that newspapers called unprintable. Chaplin paid $825,000 to make it go away, the largest divorce settlement in American history at the time. He kept making masterpieces like Modern Times and The Great Dictator, but the taint never washed off. Number 13. Clark Gable and Loretta Young. Loretta Young went to Mass every morning for 40 years, praying for forgiveness for what happened in her train compartment during the winter of 1935. She called it her mortal sin whenever she spoke about it, which was almost never. Clark Gable called it Tuesday night and never thought about it again. They were filming Call of the Wild on Mount Baker. Gable was married, Young was 22, devoutly Catholic, and had taken a vow of chastity. What happened on that overnight train ride back to Los Angeles changed everything. Young discovered she was pregnant 6 weeks later. The studio sent Young to Europe for exhaustion. She gave birth on November 6, 1935. The baby had Gable's unmistakable ears, so distinctive that Young would later have them surgically pinned back when Judy was 7, claiming it would help her hearing. For 19 months, baby Judy lived with hired families while Young visited in disguise. In June 1937, Young adopted her own biological daughter, staging photo shoots for fan magazines about her charitable heart. She invented a Catholic orphanage for the adoption story. Judy spent 31 years wondering why she looked like Clark Gable before her mother finally admitted the truth in 1966. Even then, Young made it clear the encounter wasn't consensual, though she couldn't bring herself to say more. She kept that secret and her daily prayers for forgiveness until she died at 87. Number 12. Ingrid Bergman. Senator Edwin C. Johnson stood on the Senate floor in 1950 and called Ingrid Bergman a powerful influence for evil, demanding she be banned from American films forever. Her crime was falling in love with Roberto Rossellini while still married to her first husband. When she became pregnant with Rossellini's child, America turned on its beloved star with vicious fury that shocked even Hollywood. Bergman had played a nun in The Bells of St. Mary's and the pure-hearted Ilsa in Casablanca. Audiences couldn't reconcile those roles with a woman who'd abandoned her husband and daughter for an Italian director. The same newspapers that had praised her virtue now shamed her. Churches organized boycotts. Her films were pulled from theaters. She fled to Italy, where she could walk down the street without being spat on. 7 years later, she returned to accept an Oscar for Anastasia. The audience gave her a standing ovation, Hollywood's way of saying they forgave her for being human. But Bergman never forgot those 7 years of exile. She'd made better films in Europe, had 3 more children, including Isabella Rossellini, and discovered that freedom tasted better than people's approval. Number 11. Patty Duke. Academy Award winner. Patty Duke's pregnancy test came back positive in 1970, but she had no idea who the father was. Her undiagnosed bipolar disorder had scrambled her memory of recent weeks. 3 men were possibilities: Desi Arnaz Jr., son of television stars Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, John Astin from the Addams Family, and Michael Tell, a rock promoter she barely knew. Duke married Tell in Vegas to give the baby a father. The marriage lasted 13 days before annulment. When Sean was born, she declared John Astin was the father. Astin married Duke, adopted Sean, and raised him as his own son. For 2 decades, this was the only truth that mattered. Then Duke dropped a bomb on teenage Sean. She now believed Desi Arnaz Jr. was his biological father. The revelation destroyed Sean's sense of identity. He'd grown up as John Astin's son, and suddenly his mother wasn't even sure who had fathered him. The confusion sent him spiraling for years. DNA testing in the 1990s revealed the truth. Michael Tell, the man Duke had married for less than 2 weeks and barely remembered, was Sean's biological father. The one person Duke was certain couldn't be the father turned out to be exactly that. Number 10. Judy Garland. Frank Gum owned the only movie theater in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, where he developed a reputation for giving special attention to the teenage boys who worked as ushers. In 1926, when parents started asking questions about why their sons spent so much time alone with Mr. Gum after hours, the family packed their car in the middle of the night and fled to California. 4-year-old Frances Gum, not yet Judy Garland, sang in the back seat, unaware her father was running from accusations that could have sent him to prison. Frank was gay in an era when that meant risking everything: your family, your freedom, your life. He told people they were heading west for Hollywood opportunities. Frances grew up surrounded by unspoken shame, never understanding why her mother, Ethel, drank so heavily or why her father carried such guilt in his eyes. MGM discovered Frances at 13 and transformed her into Judy Garland. Studio doctors immediately prescribed diet pills to slim her down, then added amphetamines to keep her working 18-hour days. By 16, when she filmed The Wizard of Oz, she needed barbiturates to sleep and Benzedrine to wake up. The studio had created an addict before she was old enough to understand what addiction meant. Frank died in 1935 when Judy was 13, taking Minnesota's secrets to his grave. She never learned the truth, but inherited its weight: 5 failed marriages searching for stability, suicide attempts, and decades of addiction. The pills that MGM started her on finally killed her in 1969. She was 47, destroyed by a childhood built on lies and chemicals. Number 9. Gloria Grahame. Nicholas Ray came home early from RKO Studios on an ordinary Tuesday in 1951 to find his 13-year-old son Tony in bed with his wife, Gloria Grahame. The boy was still in his school uniform. Grahame was 28, at the peak of her career, having just won an Oscar for The Bad and the Beautiful. Ray filed for divorce within the week, citing only irreconcilable differences. Hollywood's publicity machine went into overdrive to bury the story. RKO paid off servants, neighbors, anyone who might talk. The divorce papers were sealed. Tony was sent to military school in Arizona. Grahame continued working, playing seductive women in film noir classics, while the truth festered beneath the surface. Nobody asked why Nicholas Ray never spoke to her again, why Tony disappeared from Los Angeles, why Graham's eyes looked haunted in her publicity stills. 9 years later, Grahame secretly married Tony in Tijuana. She was 37, he was 22. They'd reconnected after his military service, their relationship evolving from its disturbing origins into something they insisted was love. When the marriage came out during a custody battle in 1962, Graham's career ended overnight. Studios wouldn't touch her. She fled to England, performing in regional theater, dying of cancer in 1981 without ever returning to Hollywood. The boy she'd corrupted became the only person at her deathbed, holding her hand as she died. Their marriage lasted 14 years, longer than any of her others. Number 8. Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis raised over $2 billion for children with muscular dystrophy during his telethons, crying on national television about his kids who needed help. Meanwhile, Susan Minaret sat in a Los Angeles apartment, struggling to pay for Crohn's disease medication, while watching the man she claimed was her biological father beg America to help sick children. Susan's mother, Lynn Dixon, had modeled for Lewis in the 1950s. Their 3-year affair produced Susan in 1952, according to Dixon's deathbed confession. Lewis refused every request for a meeting, every plea for a blood test, every letter Susan sent. When DNA testing in 2009 showed an 88.7% probability that Lewis was her father, his lawyers called it meaningless. He died in 2017 without ever speaking her name. The cruelest part wasn't the denial, it was the proximity. Susan could drive to the television studio where Lewis filmed his telethons. She could watch him embrace children with disabilities, promise their parents he'd never abandon them, and raise millions for medical research. One year, she sat in the audience as he talked about how every child deserved love. Security escorted her out when she tried to approach him afterward. Lewis left his estate to his second wife and their daughter. His 6 sons from his first marriage got nothing. Susan got what she'd always gotten: silence. The man who made America cry for sick children had perfected the art of pretending his own didn't exist. Number 7. Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck adopted a 10-month-old boy named Dion in 1932, hoping to save her marriage to Frank Fay. The press celebrated her as Hollywood's ideal mother. By 1951, when a reporter asked about her son, Stanwyck's response was ice cold: "I have no son." Those 3 words revealed more about Hollywood's brutal nature than any scandal sheet ever could. Dion had struggled with behavioral problems, possibly addiction. Some said he'd stolen from her. Others claimed he'd embarrassed her at industry events. Whatever the truth, Stanwyck cut him from her life with surgical precision. The woman who played strong mothers and devoted wives on screen couldn't manage to love one small boy who called her mom. When Stanwyck died in 1990, her will made the rejection complete. From an estate worth millions, Dion received exactly $5,000, just enough to prevent him from contesting the will. The rest went to her nurse, her publicist, and various charities. She left more money to the motion picture home than to the child she'd chosen to raise. Number 6. Leslie Howard. Leslie Howard played Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, the perfect Southern gentleman torn between duty and desire. But in 1924, 15 years before that role would define him, Howard had his own secret that required careful management. A young woman in London gave birth to his child, a scandal that could have ended his career before Hollywood even knew his name. The child was immediately sent to live with a family in the countryside. Howard provided financial support through his lawyer, never visiting, never acknowledging paternity. The mother disappeared from London society. Some said she'd married and moved to Canada. Others claimed she'd entered a convent. Howard continued playing romantic leads, the British public never knowing about the child growing up without a father, just hours from London. When Howard died in 1943, shot down by German fighters over the Bay of Biscay, his legitimate children inherited his estate. Number 5. Gene Tierney. Jean Tierney was signing autographs at the Hollywood Canteen in 1943, 7 months pregnant, when a female fan broke through the crowd to hug her. The fan had German measles and knew it. She'd broken quarantine just to meet her favorite star. That 5-second embrace destroyed 2 lives. When Tierney's daughter Daria was born, the doctors' faces said everything. The baby was deaf, partially blind, and would never mentally develop past the age of 3. German measles, also called rubella, is harmless to adults but catastrophic to unborn babies. The virus crosses the placental barrier and attacks the developing brain and organs. Tierney held her newborn once before Columbia Pictures arranged for Daria to be placed in a Connecticut institution. Years later, at a tennis party, Tierney overheard a woman bragging about the time she'd broken quarantine with German measles to meet Jean Tierney at the Hollywood Canteen. It was the same woman who had infected her, now laughing about her dedication as a fan. Tierney said nothing and walked away. The guilt and rage consumed her. She underwent 27 electroshock treatments, trying to forget. The treatments erased chunks of her memory, but never touched that moment at the tennis party. She spent decades visiting Daria in secret, paying for care that would never cure what one thoughtless fan had caused. Tierney had another healthy daughter, Christina, with husband Oleg Cassini, but the treatments made her forget many happy moments with her. She never fully recovered, attempting suicide twice and battling depression until her death in 1991. Number 4. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby sang White Christmas to millions of American families every December, the voice of warmth and paternal comfort. His son Gary remembered different sounds: the whistle of a leather belt through the air, the crack when it connected, his brothers crying in their beds at night. Every Saturday, Crosby would weigh his 4 sons. Any weight gain meant a beating that left welts for days. Gary published his memoir, Going My Own Way, in 1983, 6 years after Bing's death. Brothers Dennis and Lindsay confirmed the abuse. Philip, the youngest, denied it, but Lindsay's suicide note in 1989 mentioned the shadow that follows us. Dennis had already drunk himself to death. Gary died of lung cancer at 62, saying the memories were worse than the disease. Number 3. Gary Cooper and Patricia Neal. Patricia Neal found out she was pregnant with Gary Cooper's baby on a Thursday morning in 1950. By Thursday night, she was in a New York clinic, undergoing an illegal abortion that Cooper had arranged through his lawyer. The procedure cost $500 and nearly killed her when the infection set in 3 days later. Cooper sent flowers to her hospital room with a card signed, "From a Friend." Neal was 24. Cooper was 49. He'd promised to leave his wife, Rocky, promised they'd run away to Europe, promised everything except what Neal needed, for him to keep those promises. The abortion haunted her for the rest of her life. She wrote later that she could never pass a playground without wondering what her child would have looked like, whether it would have had Cooper's blue eyes or her dark hair. Cooper went back to his wife and found religion, converting to Catholicism and confessing his sins to a priest who gave him absolution. Neal found no such comfort. She suffered 3 strokes in 1965 while pregnant with her 5th child, spending years relearning to walk and speak. During her recovery, she told her husband, Roald Dahl, that she believed her strokes were punishment for the abortion. He told her that it was ridiculous. She never mentioned it again to him, but friends said she never stopped believing it. Number 2. Lon Chaney Sr. Lon Chaney became the man of 1,000 faces because he'd grown up in a house where faces were the only way to speak. Both his parents were deaf, a fact he hid from Hollywood with the same skill he used to hide his features behind makeup. His first wife, Cleva Creighton, discovered the truth only when she met his parents after their marriage. In 1913, society viewed deafness as a hereditary curse, a sign of inferior bloodlines that would taint future generations. The thought that she might have defective children, combined with learning her husband had deceived her about something so fundamental, drove Cleva to drink poison on stage during a performance at the Majestic Theater in Los Angeles. Growing up in Colorado Springs, young Lon learned that hands and expressions could say everything words couldn't. He became his parents' voice to the outside world, translating their signs to shopkeepers who stared, to doctors who spoke too fast, to neighbors who whispered. That childhood of silence and gestures created the greatest silent film actor of all time. But Chaney paid a price for his secret. He lived in constant fear that revealing his parents' deafness would mark him as genetically damaged. Studios in the 1920s destroyed careers for less, so the man who brought the Phantom of the Opera to life performed his greatest role off-screen. The son of normal parents, the man with nothing to hide. Number 1. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's daughter, Christina, waited until exactly 1 year after her mother's death to publish Mommy Dearest. The book described beatings with wire hangers, forced cleanings until dawn, and a woman who adopted 4 children as accessories to her image. But the real scandal emerged decades later when investigators discovered where those children came from. Georgia Tann ran the Tennessee Children's Home Society, which was actually a baby trafficking ring that sold over 5,000 children to wealthy families. Tann would take babies from poor mothers, telling them their children had died, then sell them to Hollywood stars for massive profits. Crawford's twins, Kathy and Cynthia, came through Tann's network in 1947. The paperwork was destroyed in a convenient fire, but financial records showed Crawford paid 5 times the typical adoption fees. That's all for today's Hollywood Secrets. Don't miss the videos on screen now. They're just as crazy. Catch you in the next one.